and for any war that comes along. But if you took that 113 billion that we've given to the Ukraine and spent it here, we wouldn't have to cut $1 from food stamps for that 30 million Americans. And all of these money that we're spending on the military is not making us safer, and it's not making us friends abroad.
There it is. RFK, you did that. You right there, you did that. And I like how he said, you know what? We should be a moral nation. And it don't bother me if all the Democrats want to go in an immoral direction, I'm gonna keep standing. So good. I'm so happy that him, Marianne Williamson, and Dr. Cornel West had the courage to step in the gap and run in 2024.
Yeah, it's important for this sort of like line to be open, because this is the Democratic Party. This is during an administration where they have the incumbency advantage. They have no intent or desire to break with their party traditions, the same tradition that said that Hillary Clinton was a great idea to elect as well. But they don't want to get past this tradition of what they give as a present to their quote unquote party leader, as the president. When in reality, the president is out of step with not only the rest of his party, but the rest of his country. And so It would be the right thing, it would be the smart thing to do to open up this debate to, you know what? I hate that I'm saying this because I dislike the Democratic Party, but I want some party to act in my interest. It would be better, it would lead to a stronger Democratic Party if you had these debates, if you had this conversation actually get hashed out. And Joe Biden had pressure kind of like was supposed to be had from Bernie Sanders and that wing in the 2020 primary, which you saw somewhat, but at least you're seeing in labor most of the time. But there'd be that pressure that Joe Biden would take into a second administration where, hey, I would hope that without having to worry about running for presidency again, he would feel a little bit more confident to say, you know what, let's add a Supreme Court justice or two, because this is how we're gonna level it out. You know what? Let's do some of these laws that'll actually help people. Let's invest money. Let's do Build Back Better, but not wait for some senators to get their heads out of their asses.
And Dan, right? Like, you know what? And you absolutely right. We in Newsnation, let me put out there that town hall clip that we showed about RFK Jr. talking about Ukraine. It was Newsnation. We got another clip to respond to, and I know we only got a few more minutes left in show. With all that toxicity between candidates as of late, here's what RFK said about that. Take a look.
I'm for de-escalating all of the poison and the hatred and the vitriol. So, whoever it is, whether it's against, President Trump or President Biden, you won't hear me saying like bad things about President Biden. I like President Biden. I've known him for probably 40 years, and this campaign is not about criticizing him, and I tried not to do that. If there's a policy I disagree with, like the war, like censorship, like the lockdowns, I'm going to criticize those. I'm not going to attack him as a man. And I'm not going to attack President Trump because we've had enough of that. We need to figure out a way to start talking to each other and to start healing each other and stop, just hating on each other. This polarization is more dangerous, and it's been in this country since the Civil War.
And as RFK Jr., again, Newsnation Town Hall put Dan up, and he's saying, look, I'm simply here to talk about the issues. And if we disagree on the issues, we will have that conversation. But I'm not about to get personal with any of these candidates. I am running because I think I can do a better job. Refreshing, Dan?
Yeah, it's a strong strategy to not only just talk about policies, but to kind of make that your standard by going, I'm not going to dig into Donald Trump's strategy or dig into this whole game of lowering politics. I'm going to represent, as many of these sort of third party candidates are doing, just an entirely different way of doing politics, not tethered to this binary system. So I appreciate that town hall for that.
Yeah, I do too. How quite refreshing. And again, I gotta repeat, I am happy and just big ups to Marianne Williamson, RFK Jr. for stepping up to the plate and not being afraid to challenge this party, the Democratic Party, and their power, and saying I'm gonna run because I believe I can do a better job. And big ups to Dr. Cornel West for saying not only am I gonna challenge, I'm going green. I'm going to shake things up in the Green Party and the third party and challenge that power too. All three of these people, we owe a great debt of gratitude because they're fearless. and going up against an incumbent president and fearless, knowing that the system is going to try to barrel down against them. Because as much as we say we don't have a monarchy in this country, politicians sure get offended when you run against them, thinking that they own the seat. And they don't own the seat. He doesn't own the presidency no more than I own the seat that I served in the Ohio Senate. So there we go. People have a right to run. So run, RFK, run. Run, Marianne Williamson, run, and run, Dr. Cornel West, run. And hell, if anybody else want to jump on in there, y'all do it. The water is fine. Well, that is our time for today. So glad that Dan Evans was here today. This has been a very heavy day. Too much is going on in this country, but I still believe that there are promises in the problems, and we can make these things right, but we can't sit idly by. You know exactly what I want you to do around this time. I always want you to keep the faith, even though God knows it's becoming harder and harder to do. I will admit that, but we must keep the faith, and more importantly, we must keep the fight. Until next time.
Welcome back to the watch list. I'm Rayyvana, filling in once again for JR Jackson. Second to last episode of me filling in. And you can catch more of me next week on Unbossed. But I'm so excited for today's show because Jackson White, Rebel HQ contributor, is here, and it's always so much fun when we get together on these shows.
It is always a good time. I think we have a similar sense of humor. You're one of the funniest people around here. Ever since I first got a snippet of you, I'll be like, yo, Rayyvana's funny as hell. I tell everybody that, so it's always a good time.
Thank you. I remember one of the first times that we were on a show together. You told me that you liked the way that I insulted people.
Yeah. That's exactly. I think that's what brought me in, and kind of you were the beacon in the darkness. You know what I'm saying? I was like, oh, she don't care.
Well, we got some really good funny stories today, but first we got to get through some heavier news. So let's start with the main story for the day. What's going on with the Supreme Court?
45 years, the United States Supreme Court has recognized the college's freedom to decide how to build diverse student bodies and to meet their responsibility of opening doors of opportunity for every single American. In case after case, including recently, just as a few years ago in 2016, the court has affirmed and reaffirmed this view that colleges could use race not as a determinative factor for admission, but as one of the factors among many in deciding who to admit from a already qualified pool of applicants. Today, the court once again walked away from decades of precedent. The court has effectively ended affirmative action in college admissions. And I strongly disagree with the court's decision.
Of course, that was President Joe Biden this morning reacting to the Supreme Court's decision to end affirmative action effectively. The conservative court ruled that the race-conscious admissions programs at Harvard and University of South Carolina are unlawful, effectively ending the policy nationwide. Now, this is despite the fact that the Supreme Court has actually in the past, in several rulings on affirmative action, used the Harvard model as an example of how to effectively do affirmative action within the bounds of the Constitution. So this is undoing precedent that's been held several times in our past. NBC News spoke with students at Harvard, and most of them, unsurprisingly, did not agree with this decision.
Well, Anna, the majority of the students that I've spoken to, and I've been in conversation with them for weeks leading up to this moment, they are reeling, they are devastated, and they're worried about what the culture, what the makeup of their classes, the future generations coming up behind them at Harvard, what they're going to look like in the future.
Is a little bit conflicting, especially when you're like, I've worked so hard my whole life to get to this point, and I don't want my racial identity to stop me from, becoming who I want to be. But then it's on the flip side to that, I feel like some racial minorities or identities and groups of people have had harder experiences in America and are not given the same opportunities as other majority groups.
Now, other universities have chosen to end affirmative action in their past. Numbers of Black students at those universities plummets almost immediately. Let's just compare the most recent admission rates of Black students in UCLA, which eliminated race as a factor here. You see 5% undergraduate, 6% graduate, versus Harvard that had affirmative action in place. 15%, that is a massive difference. Now, of course, not all of the justices agreed with the opinion in this court. It was divided exactly along political lines, with the liberal justices dissenting, and Justice Sotomayor wrote a 69-page dissent arguing that this ruling rolls back decades of progress that we've made in America. So just this in part from her dissent. In so holding, the court cements the superficial rule of colorblindness as a constitutional principle in an endemically segregated society where race has always mattered and continues to matter. Now, some people make the argument that affirmative action practices are harmful to Asian American students. New York Times wrote that Students for Fair Admissions noted in its brief that an entire industry exists to help them appear less Asian on their college applications. The group said that compared with other racial groups, applicants of Asian descent consistently received a lower personal rating, a subjective score for traits like self-confidence, likability, and kindness. 2009 Princeton study showed that Asians had to score 140 points higher on the SAT than whites to have the same chance of admission to top universities. Now, this is the argument that was being made by the organization bringing forward this court case. Despite that, 70% of Asian Americans support affirmative action programs. Despite what the narrative of this case would have you believe, 70% of Asian Americans support affirmative action. And USA Today wrote about this, saying, despite polling data and widespread Asian American activism in support of affirmative action, Students for Fair Admissions, whose conservative donors have engaged in a larger crusade targeting issues including voting rights, have sought to paint a different picture. They are, critics say, using Asian Americans as a wedge to incite infighting among communities of color. And the man crusading for the end to affirmative action, the attorney leading Students for Fair Admission, is 71-year-old white man Edward Bloom. Now, Bloom had previously enlisted white students to sue over race-based admissions at the University of Texas in 2003, and he lost. And we tried a new tactic with the Harvard case, claiming that high-achieving Asian American applicants were disadvantaged by screening policies that favored Black and Hispanic students. Now, he also, if you're wondering, some of his other work, engineered a series of lawsuits against the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This is not a man that cares about equality for Asian Americans. And Jackson, there is something really, I think, really gross about misrepresenting, the opinions of Asian Americans as if this is, a crusade that Asian American students are fighting for, when in reality, 70% of Asian Americans support affirmative action programs.
Yeah, it's definitely a cheap cop out, kind of similar to, well, we want to keep women in the house because we care about their safety. It's not because I'm insecure and, I think that every time my woman leaves my sight, another Chad will come swoop her away. It's the same type of insecurity with power. A lot of times, you look at the population density. What's America like? Still over 60% Caucasian for the most part. When you look at Black populations, they're typically in inner city areas. So affirmative action is not something that stands in the way of qualified white people from being able to get jobs. If you look at it at a case-by-case basis, the type of people who would get mad at it are people who watch too much Fox News and they assume that, well, we're just giving these people jobs because they're Black, or someone's, idiot son or idiot nephew didn't get a job that they were handed because someone, because other than that, it's kind of like cry me a river, go apply somewhere else. You know what I mean? This just isn't something that really is a real economic problem. But the Supreme Court, they rolled this back. They rolled back Roe v. Wade. They're rolling back the EPA's ability to do its job. Ron DeSantis and many other Republicans, they always talking about, we're going to eliminate the education department because, who needs that? And what does that do? It's just insecurity to power. It's just being able to maintain the pillars of classism. That's all it is.
Right. And just to all of the conservative women who are cheering this on, the group that was most likely to benefit from affirmative action were white women in America. So way to shoot yourself in the foot. But one person who, I can't think of a better example of I got mine, so I don't care if you get yours, is Clarence Thomas, who of course was on the conservative side in this opinion. He literally was the beneficiary of this type of program. So Newsweek reported that in 1971, Justice Thomas was admitted to Yale's law school as part of the affirmative action practice, according to PBS, which reported that the school wanted 10% of its incoming class that year to be students of color. So, Jackson, that's just it. Of course he would do it.
Of course, definitely. And what was it? The list that came out of everything they were willing to strike down, but not interracial marriage because
right.
My wife is white, so we can't have that. But affirmative action is why Clarence Thomas is on the Supreme Court bench. Joe Biden, that was his affirmative action, literally, because when people were coming after him, Joe Biden was one of the key people who was like, now, we can't do this. He's a Black man. It'll be a good look. We got to get him on that bench. That affirmative action in action right there. But again, it's just all for me, none for thee. And really, these people are a joke. And unfortunately, they have the reins to power. But the more I'm involved in politics, the more I just say, you can't work with them. You just got to beat them. And it's as simple as that.
Exactly. So, this is a Supreme Court that I think has really abused the power that it's been given. And with that abuse of power, let's get into a different subject where individuals abuse their power, police officers. And I want to, before we start this video, give a trigger warning that this story discusses sexual assault and racial violence. So if that is something that you are, as an individual, are sensitive to, now is a good time to, for the next 10 minutes, take a break from the broadcast. Now that I've given that warning, let's show this video.
Deputies involved with this incident were placed on administrative leave pending final investigative findings. Due to recent developments, including findings during our internal investigation, those deputies that were still employed by this department have all been terminated. We cannot, however, confirm or deny any specific facts related to this incident because of active and ongoing investigations.
6 police officers in Mississippi have finally been fired after torturing 2 black men in January. This happened in January and they were just fired. Now, the officers entered the home of Michael Corey Jenkins and Eddie Parker without a warrant, responding to reports of simply drug activity. They spent the next 90 minutes raping, tasing, and waterboarding the men. This ordeal finally ended when one officer put his gun in Jenkins' mouth and pulled the trigger. Shockingly, Jenkins survived. At a press conference for the 2 victims, one of their mothers very reasonably became visibly emotional.
They act as if my son was not even human. This is how they treated my son. After shooting him on his knees, put a bullet in his mouth.
And the trigger was pulled, intending to kill him. And it's only by God's grace that he stands here today, because the bullet escaped on the right side of his neck.
Now, we're gonna go through the details of what these men were forced to endure. I think we just need to hold in mind that the biggest question is, how are these monsters in uniform not in prison for their sadistic hate crimes? They were fired. They're not in jail. They haven't been charged with anything, just fired. That's it. So now let's go through what happened from AP News. Jenkins and his friend Eddie Terrell Parker said on the night of January 24th, 6 white Rankin County deputies suddenly came into the home where Parker was living and proceeded to handcuff and beat them. They said the deputies shocked them repeatedly with stun guns over roughly 90 minutes, and at one point forced them to lie on their backs as the deputies poured milk over their faces. Both Jenkins and Parker also informed agents with the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation that deputies stripped the 2 naked, forced them to take a shower together, and attempted to use a sex toy on them during an hours-long interrogation. Now, it says in that story, in that article, attempted to use a sex toy on them. What it should say is the officers raped them, because that is what happened. Daily Mail also reported on the story that Jenkins, who has trouble speaking because of his injuries, said that he was on his knees at the end of the ordeal when one of the deputies stood over him. The deputy placed the barrel of a gun in Jenkins' mouth. It fired and the bullet exited behind one of Jenkins' ears. Now, Jenkins, as I said earlier, survived, but his tongue was severed and his jaw was broken. We have a picture here of Parker and Jenkins, the 2 victims of this grotesque police brutality. And I'm sure at this point, you can believe it, because this is so often how these horrible stories go. The end of this, the victims were charged with crimes, not the officers, not the perpetrators, the victims. From AP News, Jenkins was charged with possessing between 2 and 10 grams of methamphetamine and aggravated assault on a police officer. Parker was charged with 2 misdemeanors, possession of paraphernalia and disorderly conduct. Now, there were 6 officers involved in the torture. They've either all been allowed to resign, or in some of their cases, they've been fired. None of them have been charged with the crime. The victims were charged with crimes. Not a single one of these officers has been charged with a crime. And we don't even know half of their names. WLBT3 reported that 3 deputies are named: Hunter Elward, Brett McAlpin, and Christian Dedman. 3 others are listed as John Does, 1 through 3. So not only did they get to, with impunity, brutalize, rape, abuse these men, then they get to do it anonymously. 3 of them at the very least, and not a single one of them is facing any actual legal repercussions. And it shouldn't surprise any of us that the officers who we know of have all been involved in several cases of brutality against Black men in the past. And apparently putting guns in people's mouths isn't uncommon for these police officers. Another Black man, Carvis Johnson, alleged in a federal lawsuit filed in 2020 that a Rankin County deputy placed a gun into his mouth during a 2019 drug bust. Johnson was not shot, thankfully not shot. But in another case involving Deputy Hunter Elward, a Black man died under mysterious circumstances, and his family is still searching for answers to this tragedy. Mississippi Public Broadcast reported that on July 26, 2021, Damian Cameron was at his family's Rankin County home when Deputy Hunter Elward arrived, responding to a call of vandalism at a neighbor's house. What happened next remains disputed, except for the fact that the 29-year-old was pronounced dead at the University of Mississippi Medical Center shortly after with trauma to his face and arms. His family said they witnessed officers chasing, then dragging him through the woods. He unfortunately died of his injuries in the hospital. And I'm warning, we're going to show this picture, but it is graphic. There you can see him on the left before, and then on the right after he was brutalized by the police and eventually died from his injuries. Jackson, this is a story that just felt like it just wasn't going to end. Just all of the instances of police brutality in this relatively small town in Mississippi, and the fact that these officers, even still with this massive amount of coverage of what's happened, are not being held accountable for any of the, I mean, they've murdered people. These are murderers and they're not being held accountable.
Yeah, I mean, and this is definitely like an example of as bad as it could get. For people to be able to do that, obviously, you gradually build up to levels of tolerance with anything. So for them to be this comfortable, clearly they were doing that on the job. And to God knows how many other people, which also begs to the question, how did people like this get on the force at all? And unfortunately, with the reality of municipalities being different, so many of these issues just really can't be solved at a federal level. There has to be collective action at the local level. Also, this happening in the state of Mississippi is very fitting, just kind of not just for the state of Mississippi, but just what's going on in a lot of states like that. The aggressive, we gotta pass a 6-week abortion ban. We just have to, you know what I'm saying? It's just really a reflection of what this country has been and what it still is. But, like I said before, these police officers absolutely were very comfortable doing this. They're very dangerous individuals who clearly have an itch that they can't fully scratch. So they're gonna keep on doing this to people because they can't stop themselves. Because, I mean, again, if you're just comfortable, this is what you do.
Exactly. And just because these individual officers resigned, that there's obviously a culture of allowing this within that police department, and honestly within most police departments. So we'll keep an eye out on Rankin County and cover, hopefully eventually justice coming out of there and keep demanding it. But we have to go to a break right now. We'll be back with a lot lighter stories on the other side, so stick around.
Welcome to Indisputable. I'm your host, Dr. Rashad Richard. We got a lot happening today. But what do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable.
Rashad, great to be here. Congratulations on the new show. And I gotta let everybody know that Rashad and I go way back.
Here's the pattern that we see in all of these Karen stories. They think they own stuff they do not own. Now, where does that come from? I don't know, maybe slavery. Maybe they think they should still own black people.
This is what happens when Karens weaponize the police.
When you're used to privilege, equality seems like oppression.
It hits you in a certain way when someone is holding you against your will, treating you like you're a criminal and you're an innocent person. This is something that black people face no matter where they are.
A stronger black economy lends itself to a stronger, greater economy. Don't think it's exclusive of you, it's inclusive of you.
What's your beef with critical race theory?
It adds more fuel to the fire of the racist tendencies that we already have.
We have a generation of problem solvers that can remedy the problem if they are properly taught what the problem is.
You know who created redlining in this country? The white liberal.
I don't give a damn who created it. If it's a racist policy. Shelley, here's what I don't know. I don't know. See, there you go filibustering, brother. You're scared of this truth, but you're gonna get it, though.
Climate is changing fundamentally, extremely, and non-linearly. It's becoming worse now. It's not when the levees burst that is the problem. It's in the anticipation of that.
So I hope every human being is safe. And by human beings, I do not include multinational corporations, especially the ones that started climate change in the first place.
What we're currently doing right now in cutting emissions is clearly not enough. There will be ramifications to what Trump is doing. I don't want people to suffer, but I feel like there's gonna be a lot of suffering because we have an imbecile as our leader.
Welcome back to the watch list. We've got some really good stories coming up, including one that I've been looking forward to covering since I saw it right before we went on air yesterday, which is a ukulele apology video for honestly what is a literal heinous crime. So there's that story. We've got some RFK Jr. stuff because he can't stop putting his foot in his mouth. But before we get to those stories, let's take a look at what some of you have to say. And let's start as we do in the TYT member section. Vicky says, Ray, you are looking smoking. And hugs and kisses to Jackson. Oh, thank you very much, Vicky.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Mickey C, the silver-haired dragon, says, since the Supreme Court is pretending to want student admissions to be fair and balanced, then I'm sure they'll end legacy admissions and giving preference to kids of the super wealthy, right? Right? Of course not. Of course that would make logical sense. Of course then, because it makes sense, they won't do it. Absolutely. Also, I'll just say I read a little bit of the opinion in that case this morning while I listened to it being read to me while I was working out, because that's what I use to get pumped up while I'm working out at the gym is text to speech of Supreme Court decisions.
It's efficient. It's efficient. You know what I'm saying? Like otherwise you'd have to do it later. And sometimes later comes and you're like, eh.
Exactly. Got a double task. But I will say the opinion was absurd because it literally read like racism is over, so we don't need affirmative action anymore. But also racism is real against white people, and we need to correct that.
Yes, of course. Racism is no longer a part of human psychology. We're no longer human beings. Basically, so I guess.
That's literally what they're arguing. It's just such an absurd decision. Of course, the writing was on the wall. They were always going to rule this way. But God, you just always hope. You hold out that little bit of hope that they'll do the right thing. Fiddle and Nero says on Twitch, a lot of these ghouls do nothing to hurt the stereotype that you can tell a person's moral value by their appearance. I guess a lifetime driven by hate and grievance, so you're outside looking like your rotten soul. Yep, it definitely hate ages you. Definitely ages you. Ghost Dog TV says, in other words, sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was about to say, or it keeps you alive forever. One of the two. You know what I'm saying? One of the two. You never know.
Yeah, the good definitely die young, and the bad definitely live forever.
Yeah, man. The world is backwards.
Ghost Dog TV says, in other words, Thomas is living proof that America needs a reboot. And Spectrophonic says, Snacksin, love ya.
Oh, thank you. Oh yeah, Spectrophonic be showing me love on politics and paper. You know what I'm saying? We stream every day. And Rayyvana, we gonna get you on there for sure because it's gonna be absolutely hilarious.
Absolutely. I'd love to be on.
But now we in a good position to now, so I'm gonna hit you up.
Okay. Sounds good. And speaking of giving you love, Samira the Truth says Jackson is so calm. I envy his coolness.
Well, I guess so. Thank you. I say I guess so in terms of calmness because I'm not always that calm, but I'm calm when I need to be. So thank you. I appreciate it.
And then a compliment for both of us from Manuel, Rayyvana, and Jackson White. Great team. It is a great team. And let's use this great team to tackle this next. Let's do it. Story. Let's just do it. Let's get into it.
Hi, everyone. I've been wanting to come online and talk to you about a few things. Even though my team has strongly advised me to not say what I want to say, I I recently realized that they never said that I couldn't sing what I want to say. Many years ago, I used to message my fans, but not in a creepy way like a lot of you are trying to suggest. It was more of a loser kind of way, where I was just trying to be besties with everybody. It's kind of like when you go to like a family gathering, and there's a weird aunt there who keeps coming up to you and going like, "Hey girl, what's the tea?" And you're like, ugh. That was me, but in group chats with my fans. It was weird.
Why did you do that at all? She basically was just like sitting at the piano, was like, yeah, so I used to have these really creepy relationships with people. Bing, 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 bing. And sometimes like people would accuse me of stuff I shouldn't have done. You can actually see it on camera. It's kind of the truth. And my team, by the way, they told me to like chill and not do this, and then she just pulls out like a drumstick and is like, boop, boop, hits it twice, and then she just keeps going. And the first thing, just real quick, the first thing she said, she should have listened. My team told me not to do this, but I'm kind of doing it anyway. Like, right. Maybe you should have listened.
She's like, my lawyers begged me not to do this, but I groom kids. She pulls out a vuvuzela and blows.
Right. Exactly. Pull out a didgeridoo, you know what I'm saying, and just start going crazy. She just pull out a full drum set. No. And two, this is some very, hard. This is a hard topic. Grooming children. You know what I'm saying? This isn't something light. This is. Right. It's not like you got accused of like ripping someone off and you could just kind of like, yeah, whatever, they just hating on me. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't really pull that card with this, like the hate card that is jealous of my clout. It's like, yeah, you really should have just shut up. You know what I'm saying?
So for anyone who's out of the loop as to, what this video was, obviously this is a super cringy apology video, maybe the worst one ever produced, which is saying something considering how bad so many apology videos are. YouTube personality Miranda Sings, or her real name, Colleen Ballinger, outdid herself, honestly, in response to allegations of grooming her young fans. Her idea was to sing her explanation with a ukulele. And it's not the whole video. Of course it's not. So here's another clip of her incriminating herself.
I've been sharing my life online for over 15 years. I've poured my heart out to you, and because of that, I feel like I'm talking to my friends. But in the beginning of my career, I didn't really understand that maybe there should be some boundaries there. There were times in the DMs when I would overshare details of my life, which was really weird of me. I haven't done that for years, you see, because I changed my behavior and I took accountability.
I would not say that she's taken accountability. I would argue that singing a ukulele song in response to allegation of grooming children is only further evidence that she hasn't taken accountability. But Jackson, I'll say we are also people who have lived, a portion of our lives very publicly online. I would never use the fact that I'm, a very public person. I have a, public facing persona online. I've never groomed a child because of that. How is that justification for what
exactly?
She did?
There was a banana peel on the ground, and next thing I knew, I found myself in a life filled with debauchery and sin. You know what I'm saying? It's just like and basically what she did, she took the ukulele and she was like, 2 wrongs do make a right. Shut up, give me a. You know what I'm saying? Like that was her whole argument. 2 wrongs make a right. I've been on the internet for 15 years. So just kind of get over it, whatever, I was young. But this is some pretty heavy stuff and very weird. Definitely the weirdest apology that I've ever seen. And actually too, very desperate. Like this seemed kind of desperate to me. Like she was like looking for some type of a lifeline, some type of way to kind of churn the court of public opinion in her direction positively. And I guess this is all she had, because we're talking about grooming children, and you can't make that look good. You know what I'm saying? Right. Like, how do people even accuse you of that? It's just
exactly. And like, just to get into the meat of the allegations and what she has been accused of, and it resulted in this very bizarre apology video. Now this news reported on it. Allegations against Ballinger date back to April 2020, when YouTuber Adam McIntyre, now 20, released a video claiming she established an unhealthy relationship with him when he was 13. McIntyre said that he first met Ballinger in 2014 and that the two initially had a, quote, very professional interaction. He said they spoke again in 2016 when he joined one of her live streams. during which Ballinger said she'd give, quote, ugly and unused clothes to fans. McIntyre and Ballinger later said Ballinger later sent her lingerie. She sent lingerie to an underage boy.
As one does on a Tuesday, you know what I'm saying? Like it just goes down like that sometimes. Just like the Pentagon, we just accidentally overspent $3 trillion. You know how you do that,
Right.
Same concept.
She also accidentally ended up in a group chat with her underage fans called Colleenie's Weenies, apparently, according to the Daily Beast. Yeah. Fans, including Adam McIntyre, alleged that in private group chats, Ballinger behaved inappropriately when they were teenagers. In a YouTube video, McIntyre has shared screenshots in which Ballinger asked the group questions such as, "Are you a virgin? And what's your favorite position?" And now you might have noticed in her apology video, she's talking about sharing, intimate details of her life in group chats. And apparently those intimate details were that of her last marriage, because according to Now This News, additionally, McIntyre said Ballinger told members of their chat that her then husband, Joshua Evans, was, quote, emotionally abusive, adding that she sought solace in her underage fans. Evan has denied allegations of abuse. I could solve this for you right now, girl. If you're having relationship issues, find solace with your adult friends. Why do you have no adult friends? It's not looking good for you.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, she's clearly an incredibly difficult person to deal with in real life, obviously. And not even just from the sense of that you are good with kids, because some people are teachers, some people work with kids, people are around kids for a living oftentimes, or they have big families. This isn't one of those situations. Like you pointed out, she was seeking solace. She was looking for comfort in people who really don't understand anything that she's talking about fully. And how is asking a child, intimate sexual questions seeking solace? How's that going to make you feel better about anything? It doesn't make any sense at all. All that's going on is you're a pervert. That's it.
Exactly. And we've got one more video of her not taking accountability, and then after this, we'll get into some of the responses, including that of Adam McIntyre. But first, Miranda sings.
I thought you wanted me to take accountability, but that's not the point of your mob mentality, is it? No, your goal is to ruin the life of the person you despise while you dramatize your lies and monetize their demise. I feel like I can already hear the comments on this video. She's gaslighting, manipulating. Oh, she's a narcissist and a rat. I would never make a mistake like that. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that all of you are perfect, so please criticize me. Bring out the daggers made from your perfect past and stab me repeatedly in my bony little back. I know you wanted me to say that I was 100% in the wrong. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna take that route of admitting to lies and rumors that you made up for clout. I also wanted to take a minute to talk about that girl Miranda sings. You know the one. Yeah, her. She's PG-13. It says that on my website, and it's always been that way. And that's why you won't find my videos on the YouTube Kids app.
Listen, I've made many a mistake in my life that I can own up to. I would never call myself a perfect person. But one thing that I can pat myself on the back about, apparently, is the fact that I've never groomed a child. You don't have to be a perfect person to not groom children. You just have to not be a pedophile. That's it. That's it.
It's a pretty avoidable situation. It's not like a puddle you accidentally step in. It's kind of like a giant sea that's miles in front of you that you can smell in the air before you can see it. Like it's incredibly easy to avoid. But that last video was definitely the cringiest part because she basically said everything that she is, narcissistic, gaslighting, and everything else, what have you. But she's crazy. Like she definitely she's nuts. She's like I said before, she's somebody who ain't nobody really trying to deal with. And I don't even want to imagine what dating her is like. And I know I ain't even gonna go there. But again, like it's kind of all related. Like she's just like she's a head case, and it's clear that she is. That woman's crazy.
Right. And so we have a response here from Adam McIntyre, who I've mentioned throughout the story, was one of the victims of her inappropriate behavior. He responded to this and said, "She did this to me in 2020. I can deal with this again, but I just can't believe how truly evil this woman is. I am so upset. And he has every right to be so upset. All of the victims of her inappropriate behavior have every right to be upset. But now a lot of the reaction, she's saying, everyone's gonna be saying, oh, no accountability, blah, blah, blah in the comments. Some of the responses are just downright funny, all right? So here's one comment from under her YouTube video. This ain't all too well 10-minute version, girl, you groomed kids. And then there's a comparison to maybe the worst, the second worst apology video ever. Choose your fighter, Colleen Ballinger ukulele apology versus Sienna May interpretive dance apology. And for anyone who doesn't remember the Sienna May drama, she was accused of sexually assaulting her boyfriend and being emotionally abusive to him. And then she made an interpretive dance instead of saying she was sorry. Jackson,
the Holy Spirit came down and washed away the past through the power of interpretive dance. That's right. What were we gonna ask?
I was just gonna say, we've seen so many horrible apology videos. What is your take on making an apology, or even celebrities attempting to make apologies?
I mean, honestly, it's at this point, we have huge celebrities down to the micro celebrity. People being in the public eye is very normal now. And so public apologies often really don't hold much weight, often because what are people really apologizing about? Let's say, for instance, like Will Smith going up on stage and slapping Chris Rock. Like, you did it, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, you made the choice to go ahead and go up there and do it. Like, that was a very easy thing to not do. But like publicly apologizing, I mean, like, I can't say like he shouldn't have done it or he should have done it, but it really don't make that much of a difference. Now I can see like maybe if you're a politician or you're some type of community leader in a way that like the stakes are higher, maybe people put their faith in you or you slipped up, or it's like, okay, being accountable, I would say, isn't always apologizing. Being able to come out and just be accountable and inform people about what's happening. But typically, if you're coming out and apologize, like, what's it for? Like, hey guys, I'm sorry that I'm addicted to drugs. Like just go handle it. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not against it, but it's kind of like, if you're grooming kids, I don't really know how that's gonna erase it, especially not with a ukulele. You feel me?
Right, exactly. At that point, your accountability is maybe going to jail for what you did.
That exactly.
To her and to that makeup YouTuber whose name I just immediately forgot, who was also accused of the same thing and made several horrible apology videos. But as long as we're talking about people who can't accept accountability for their actions, let's get into this next story about Ron DeSantis.
It's great to get a little bit of pep in my step this morning after Florida was in the College World Series last night against LSU. I can tell you as a Florida guy, I usually don't get fazed by the heat. Florida, it's the opposite. We go above and beyond. People coming across the border are staying away from Florida. But same thing with people trying to come to Florida by boats. These are illegal entries into Florida. We see it in Florida at record numbers in Florida. Now in Florida, we recognize you got to deal with supply. So we've created an opioid response recovery network in Florida. Florida, I have a unique vantage point as governor and come to my free state of Florida. I was born and raised in Florida, and I never remember seeing a single California license plate in the state of Florida. I met people in Florida, and I can cite you statistics about Florida, and they are going to greener pastures. The #1 landing spot is the free state of Florida. Florida, 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 Florida.
Listen, that was a Trump ad, but you gotta hand it to his team. It was very funny. Yeah. It was a good attack ad on Ron DeSantis. Now, as you just heard in that ad, DeSantis is talking to New Hampshire voters during a town hall where he cannot stop talking about how great Florida is, which is not really a great strategy when you're running for president and you're trying to win over significant amounts of other states, not just Florida. Just winning Florida is not going to win you an election. But you mentioned this earlier, Jackson, that in other set of policy proposals, DeSantis proposed eliminating the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, and the IRS unless they stop acting woke.
Yeah, because first and foremost, as if our education system as a whole doesn't have so many issues that in a lot of ways only a federal overhaul could really address it nationally. our education system just simply doesn't prepare people for the modern job market or the future job market. But that's kind of delving off into a separate topic. But Ron DeSantis is so ridiculous. We could sit here for the next 3 hours and just list off how this man just does not have what it takes. Okay, let's talk about policy. The 15-week abortion ban, then the 12-week, then the 6-week, because he has to outdo himself. Then the issues that he has going on with the migrant situation. Don't nobody want to be there. People are leaving. That's causing issues with the economy. The Disney situation that he's losing, that Republicans really don't like, on top of his personality, and on top of this, his whole branding, the Florida, and people really ain't vibing with it, including the immigrants that you just dissed in that commercial who don't want to work there. So he's just a loser, like Trump says,
Speaking of politicians who are losers, I think you'll enjoy also making fun of this next politician, Jackson. Ladies and gentlemen, Eric Adams.
Before and after that you supported those rent increases, why in New York City, where the real estate is controlling you, Mr. Mayor, why are we having these horrible rent increases last year and this year?
Okay, first, if you're going to ask a question, don't point at me and don't be disrespectful to me. I'm the mayor of this city, and treat me with the respect I deserve to be treated. I'm speaking to you as an adult. Don't stand in front like you treated someone that's on the plantation that you own. Give me the respect I deserve and engage in a conversation up here in Washington Heights. Treat me with the same level of respect I treat you. So don't be pointing at me. Don't be disrespectful to me. Speak with me as an adult, because I'm a grown man. I walked into this room as a grown man, and I'm gonna walk out of this room as a grown man. I answered your question. Go to the.
He most certainly did not answer her question. And the woman who asked the question was housing activist Janine Dubnow. I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly. Now, her question that he again did not answer was concerning rent, that Adams was too much of a coward to respond to. But it was about a recent rent increase made by NYC's Rent Guidelines Board. Now, this board is comprised of unelected officials chosen by Adams, vetoed 5-4 for increasing rents for voted 5-4 for increasing rents for rent stabilized tenants. And of course, as you'll see in this clip, NYC residents were not happy about this decision. Okay, I've got some more on Eric Adams' horrible track record as it comes to housing policy. But Jackson, I got to bring you in on this first. I mean, he's sitting there like, I'm not a baby, I'm a grown man.
Yeah, and it's like she's an older woman. She was older than you. And again, like the whole thing, let's flip over the verse. He's like, I'm the man of the city. Don't be coming up here talking to me like you crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, bro, answer the question. It's a very legitimate issue. People can't afford their rents. People can't afford groceries. People can't afford many things, especially in cities like NYC, all over California, here in Jersey where I'm at. But Eric Adams, ever since he was elected, he's just struck me as a really strange person. And he really he's just out there. I mean, who would do this? I can't think of anyone else who would do something like this. Like, you just berated an old woman who can't afford her rent. She's an activist for people who can't afford their rent. You talking about some, don't come up in here talking to me like this. Like, how is she supposed to talk to you? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is she supposed to say? Exactly. And she wasn't even disrespectful.
That's exactly it, especially because, she's coming here with a very valid point, especially when we consider his track record when it comes to policies on housing. Now, he recently blocked a set of housing bills that would have helped unhoused New Yorkers. We have this post from New York Working Families Party that says, Eric Adams' veto of a critical package of housing bills condemns thousands of unhoused New Yorkers to overcrowding shelters and overpoliced subways. This comes mere days after Adams' Rent Guidelines Board raised the rents on over 2 million rent regulated tenants. And I mean, this is the guy who's made, this is the guy whose position has been, we need to get people back in person to work. This is the guy who tried to take down drill music. That was his big crusade, was to stop drill rap from taking hold in the city. I mean, I don't understand. You're right. He's a very strange man, Jackson. He's a very bizarre politician. I think he has no political instincts. And I genuinely, honest to God, don't really still even today understand how he became mayor of New York City.
Yeah, I think it was just kind of the unique time that he ran. We were still, in the middle of getting over everything with COVID, and all, just the backlash with that NYC being the city that got hit the worst. But I think that as soon as somebody with some real charisma and bravado and half a decent track record comes along, they're going to blow them out of the water. Because, like, if you got on, even just from a debating perspective, I mean, after seeing something like that, like, you can't handle a little sweet old lady talking about rent increases, then what can you handle, But I think he's going to be out of here relatively quickly. Could be wrong, but he's just weird.
Right. And speaking of weird, let's get into the very weird and very racist statements being made by a pastor who also has a weird connection to a mildly famous family. Take a look.
150 years ago, or 200 years ago, when the blacks were slaves, did they ever go to Washington, D.C. and have a rally 200 years ago to protest against slavery? Did they? No. What did they do? Well, a lot of good people in the plantations would say, hey, it's wintertime. Let us help build a church for you, dear folks. And they loved them and taught them how to read so they can read the Bible. And here's what the blacks did about 150 years ago. They humbled themselves. They prayed. They sought God's face and they turned from their wicked ways, and God made slavery illegal through several white presidents, right? It worked, didn't it?
There is so much in that clip we need to respond to, but first I have to say this. I have to say it. Did you think that slaves needed to be humbled? That was a group of people that needed to be taken down a peg. People who were literally sold into chattel slavery. They were, walking around like they were too good for everybody until those lovely, wonderful slave owners came down and said, I love you. Let me build you a church and teach you to read. And also I'm going to beat the life out of you and potentially kill you if you don't work my fields for no money. Jackson, it's so shockingly offensive and historically inaccurate.
And I mean, he just is clearly a dumb guy who doesn't know anything. I mean, even outside of just talking about this, you could tell there's just not much going on up there, because in all that we watched, he really didn't say that much. All he could have said was, there were some pretty decent slave owners, and in fact, they taught them the love of Jesus, and that kind of helped set them on the right path. But he's not intelligent enough to just cleanly say anything. He was up there like, well, you know what? It was like just like going on in his head, like his thoughts were like scrambling. And, just Pearly Things found herself in this situation too, where it's like just trying to describe stuff. Well, a lot of slaves saw George Washington as a father figure. And it's just like, shut up. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's such a pointless thing to defend. And it says a lot about you if you even try to. Because people being owned, like, no one's gonna like that. And on top of all the slave revolts that happened, not just in this country, but all over the Western Hemisphere. This guy clearly doesn't know anything about anything, and he also looks like a giant toad. So there's that.
There is that, and I'll just say that this is somebody who believes that Biden, as he puts it, is spiritually wicked. But I think we didn't even, because it was the absurdity of what he said was so overwhelming. We didn't even mention the fact that his point in that video was that he was arguing that people should pray for Trump to get back in power instead of rioting on January 6th. He compared Trump no longer being the president to slavery. To slavery.
But again, slavery for him wasn't that bad. It was benevolent. It was a benevolent system that took drooling, stupid Africans and showed them civility, basically. And next thing you know, now we have some opportunity in the land. That's how he sees it. And that's about the extent of his knowledge. But you can't have it both ways. Slavery can't be what you're referring to Trump not being reelected, but also it really wasn't that bad, so you got to choose one.
There's also this really bizarre twist in the story that the pastor's son-in-law is Josh Duggar, the disgraced oldest brother from the show 19 Kids and Counting, who's, by the way, currently in prison serving a sentence for possession of child pornography.
Oh, well, no one's perfect. Sin exists in the world, and Jesus, all you got to do is call on Jesus, and he'll come in there and he'll wash your sins white as snow. You know what I'm saying? That's all you got to do. You just always have to believe in Jesus. That's it. But, Donald Trump, him being out of office, that's the devil, of course. So is Barack Obama.
Yeah. Who was it that said that that Barack Obama, Thomas Sowell, said that Barack Obama was as bad as Adolf Hitler? And that what you just said reminded me of that, because you brought up Just Pearly Things getting really embarrassed on the H3 podcast as they tried to hold her accountable.
That was
for claiming.
So bad.
So horrible. Because she's making the argument that because Roots was a movie, that it was overplaying the awfulness of slavery, and she just couldn't actually defend that point. But you have to defend that point, right? If you're a conservative, you made the point, you can't apologize, you can never say you're wrong. So you have to sit there and say, yeah, actually, I think that slavery wasn't that bad. And especially as a white conservative saying that, you'll never be able to say that in a way that doesn't make you look like the worst person to ever exist.
And they don't understand it, and they don't want to understand it. And again, it's really bigger than just like what happened in America with the slavery system. It's really just being willing to understand how society works and how human beings function and what we do to each other, depending on the circumstances, depending on what the environment's like. It's really just more about that. So oftentimes when people go above and beyond to do things like protect the American system of slavery, you're really just showing that you don't understand the world and you don't understand how society works. That's all you're showing.
I mean, and it's the same people right now who are making the argument that affirmative action is actually racist and that it's anti-racist to reverse a policy that was only put in place to attempt to, reverse the horrible impacts of segregation and slavery in this country. So now to claim that actually white people are the victims of racism, actually slavery wasn't that bad, actually white people were the people who, educated the slaves and uplifted them out of slavery. I mean, it really is somehow creating a narrative where they're always the victim and they're always the savior. In these conservatives' minds, they have to be both. White people have to be both sides of the coin, and they're in ridiculous narrative of American history.
I was gonna say how the West was won, that type of attitude. You know what I'm saying? Like how we won the West. It was won fair and square. We just, you know what I'm saying? It was a game, and we just won the game. But I think that's a book or a song, How the West Was Won. But it sums up the attitude. This country was won, but in fact, this country's an empire. Just look at all the land we control. And two, I mean, just it's so crazy. Like you look at some of the things, the horrible things that have happened in this country that weren't that long ago. When you really put it in perspective, my grandfather was born in 1916, and a lot of the massacres and the situation that was going on with a Native American named Sitting Bull happened in like not that long before that. Plains Indians literally just being straight up massacred. The treaty after treaty after treaty being broken. These things happened like in the very late 1800s, the early 1900s. These things weren't long ago. You know what I'm saying? So like the United States, in fact, has a very rich history of becoming an empire, because that's what the United States is. Our landmass is huge, and it used to be many, many, many nations, and now it's not.
Right. And I think just to the point of like how recent this history really is, the argument that the Supreme Court is making, and I'm bringing it back to this other story about affirmative action, is that racism is over, which is an absolutely absurd thing to claim. I mean, first of all, Jim Crow laws, the Civil Rights Act wasn't passed, until the mid 1960s. That's recent. That's exceptionally recent.
My dad was born in 1951. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
This is exceptionally recent history. So the idea that in just, one or two generations, we have completely, destroyed concepts of race and inequality in this country, we could look around and say, that's obviously not the case.
Mm-hmm. And again, racism is honestly just a part of human psychology. It just is. So that's why there's always work to be done.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we are out of time. Jackson, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes.
Remind all the people where they can follow you and see your content.
Yes, follow me at youtube.com/@politicsandpaper. We stream all the time, and I got a weekly show on Wednesday nights, and we're going to get Rayyvana on there very soon. So, yeah, check me out, Politics and Paper. Another great show with you.
Thanks. Yep, great show with you as well. And everybody go check out his other content. Thank you for tuning in. Stick around because the main show's next, and we have more watch lists for you tomorrow. So don't forget to tune into that as well.